Okay, so tell me why you decided to become a funeral director.
When I was in college, I was taking a course in anthropology, and we started looking into the anthropology of life and death. And a friend of mine was from Baltimore, where I was in college, and he asked me why I thought there were so many funeral homes around Baltimore. And I said, well, people die all the time. And he said, no, people here are killed. That really shook me. And I said, well, why do you think that is? And he said he didn't know, but that a number of his friends and family members had been murdered. And I asked him if he had had time to really grieve for that. And was the grief different every time it happened? And he said, the grief is different every time it happens, and I've never had time to do it. And he knew that the college I went to required study abroad, and he asked if I would go to Rwanda to see whether or not people who were there, who had also experienced the deaths and the murders of their neighbors, had any wisdom, because in his opinion, they had stopped killing one another. So I said, yeah, I'll go to Rwanda and I'll see if I can't answer your question. So I went to Rwanda and I lived there. And one of the things I learned was so critical to stopping the genocide in 1994 was that people were given the opportunity to experience rituals that were traditional, but that were adapted to the needs of survivors of genocide victims. So then I went back to Baltimore and I thought about survivors of homicide victims and whether or not we as Americans were adapting our rituals to suit their needs. And we weren't. So it became very clear to me that the only way I could start to disrupt these cycles of generational violence, which I know very intimately as the granddaughter and niece of Holocaust survivors, was to create rituals that were disruptive of potential generational trauma. Who is on the phone when a traumatic or potentially traumatic death occurs? It's a funeral director. So if I could put myself on the other end of that phone line and get people to participate in taking care of the person who was killed or who had died in a way that would be meaningful to them, I could potentially shift what would otherwise become a trauma that was passed on from generations to a memory that a person has agency over and that they were a participant in and not just a victim of. So that's why I became a funeral director.